Welcome to NANP's monthly educational webinar series. I am your host, Andrea Granson, Education Specialist for the NANP. Today's topic is ME and post-viral fatigue, symptoms and protocols with Dr. Sarah Myhilll. These webinars are recorded and can be viewed at any time by logging into the NANP members area, where you can earn 1 continuing education credit. Okay, let's get started. Today's webinar will focus on ME, which is chronic fatigue plus inflammation. This webinar is the sequence to part 1, where Dr. Sarah Myhilll addressed chronic fatigue in great detail. So if you haven't watched that video, I highly suggest that you check it out. Okay, for those of you listening for the first time, Dr. Sarah Myhilll is a pioneering naturopathic physician, ecological medicine doctor and nutritionist with over 40 years of medical experience. She began her career as a medical doctor in 1981, and for 20 years she worked as a general practitioner within the UK National Health Service. In the last 2 decades, Dr. Myhilll has been working as an independent naturopathic physician, which has given her more clinical freedom to do what she believes is best for her clients. She has a special interest in chronic fatigue syndrome and ME, a complex and debilitating condition that affects millions of people worldwide. Dr. Myhilll is also an award-winning author, having written 6 books and 3 scientific papers. Her books cover a wide range of topics related to health and well-being, including nutrition, energy, and stress management. She is also a sought-after lecturer, mentor, and workshop leader, and she regularly presents at conferences and events around the world. Thank you for joining us for part 2. It's an honor to have you back, Sarah. It's now over to you.
Well, thank you for that introduction, and it sounds very flattering. I can see now I'm going to have to live up to my reputation. Okay, so as many people who've followed this will know, this is my area of special interest. Doesn't necessarily make that my area of expertise, but the key point to remember about chronic fatigue syndrome and ME is these are not diagnoses, they are clinical pictures, and we have to ask the question why. So chronic fatigue syndrome is the clinical picture where we have poor energy delivery mechanisms, and we've spoken about that. ME is the clinical picture when you have poor energy delivery mechanisms and inflammation. So the symptoms of ME are characterized by symptoms of inflammation, and inflammation occurs when the immune system is busy. And this is where it ties in with chronic fatigue, because the immune system is enormously demanding of energy. And if the immune system is busy, then that will kick a hole in your energy bucket. So this is why we see the 2 conditions in parallel with each other. Now, we then have to first ask, what are the symptoms of inflammation? And that, say, local symptoms of inflammation are characterized by redness, heat, swelling, pain, loss of function. So the classic example would be an abscess on your body, redness, swelling, heat, pain, loss of function. But where they impact on an organ such as muscles, arteries, joints, skin, then we get symptoms of inflammation there. Myocarditis, arteritis, polymyalgia, dee-da. And then we have general symptoms of inflammation when we have the whole body is afflicted, and often that presents with malaise, a flu-like feeling. If any of you have ever had flu, you know how it feels. That's how my ME patients feel like all the time. Sometimes there's fever associated with that, pain, and of course loss of function. The joints don't work, the muscles don't work, the heart doesn't work. And then if you get inflammation in the brain, then you can get sickness behavior. And this is how the brain protects us from ourselves. It stops us going out and rushing around doing lots of jobs and using up energy when there's inflammation going on in the brain. So things like lethargy, depression, anxiety, feeling sleepy, loss of appetite, hyperalgesia, inability to concentrate, and so on and so forth. So it's not a psychological illness, it's totally physiological, or rather pathological. Now, the problem with diagnosing ME is that the symptoms are non-specific. So you may well have these symptoms of inflammation, but it doesn't tell us why. It doesn't tell us if you're inflamed because of allergy or autoimmunity, which is when the immune system is behaving badly. So if you think of the body as a country, allergy occurs when our standing army, because the standing army, of course, is our immune system. Allergy occurs when that standing army starts to attack the benign tourists, things like house dust mite and foods, which don't cause us any harm, but the immune system gets its wires crossed. Or worse than that, autoimmunity. And autoimmunity is civil war. That's when the immune system is attacking itself or the own body. And that, of course, is very bad news. Or the immune system can be activated for reasons of chronic infection. And what should happen when you get exposed to infection is there should be acute reaction against that infection, where we get an acute illness with all the symptoms of runny nose, snotty nose, diarrhea, vomiting, cough, sneezing, fever, all those things. All those symptoms help to physically get rid of that microbe that's attacking us, and then the immune system is activated to kill it where it has access to the body. So if it does get into the bloodstream or the bladder or the skin or the glands or wherever, you get inflammation there to kill the microbes. So those are the kind of the broad reasons why we should get an ME. Those are the broad symptoms. So the first thing we have to do is, and the nice thing we have to do is to try to identify what it is that's causing those symptoms. And this is why for allergy, my view is there aren't any good allergy tests. It's all about good detective work. And so often people spend lots of money on allergy tests and think that the tests are accurate and say, oh, the allergy test says it's fine for me to eat wheat, it's fine for me to eat dairy, it's fine for me to have yeast, or it's fine to have egg, and that is not the case. So the starting point to diagnose allergy is to, and we often start with foods, is to do the paleo-ketogenic diet. Cut out the major allergens, grains, dairy products, and see what's left. Because one of the problems about allergy is that allergy and addiction are two sides of the same coin. We get addicted to our allergens and we get allergic to our addictions. And what that means is that in the short term, we often get relief from our symptoms by eating that addictive substance. And then in the medium term, we get side effects. It's exactly like addiction. When you have your glass of wine, your cigarette, your shot of caffeine, and no, this isn't coffee, this is herbal tea. You get a little temporary relief for your symptoms, and then you get the withdrawal. So getting off all your addictions and your allergens is a very useful start. Autoimmunity is more tricky. We don't have any, because autoimmunity, we're seeing epidemics of autoimmunity at the moment. And my view is that, well, we know that there are three main drivers of autoimmunity. Number one is vaccines. Number two is vitamin D deficiency. And number two is probably Western diets, which are very high in allergens and tend to switch on the immune system. And number three is vitamin D deficiency. But number one, overwhelmingly, is vaccinations. Vaccinations are very good at switching on autoimmunity. And the reason for that is that the way vaccinations work, the idea, the theory behind them, is that you present the immune system with a foreign antigen like polio virus or measles virus or mumps virus or whatever. You inject into the body and hope that will generate immunity as a result. But that doesn't work because the body is intelligent. The immune system will see that vaccine and say, oh, it's a bit of dead virus. Oh, it's a bit of attenuated virus. Oh, that's not serious. And you don't get an immune response. So vaccines only work if they've got a wake-up call in them. And that wake-up call is an adjuvant. And that adjuvant has to be something very nasty indeed, because if it isn't something very nasty indeed, then the immune system won't wake up to it. Typically, it's heavy metal. So it used to be mercury, and these days it's often aluminium. Very nasty toxic substances which stimulate the immune system and wake it up. Now, it's all very well waking up the immune system, hoping you will get immunity to that bit of virus or that bit of bacteria that's in there. But you may actually wake up the immune system to self. You may actually wake it up and switch on autoimmunity. Not my words, but the words of Professor Yehuda Schoenfeld, a very experienced clinical immunologist who travels the world as an expert witness at vaccine autism trials. And of course, we don't get the outcome of that because there's always a gagging clause applied. but many papers he's produced, if you Google ASIE, ASIE, autoimmune syndromes induced by adjuvants, you will see much of his research demonstrating that vaccines switch on autoimmunity. So I say we don't have very good tools for switching off autoimmunity and allergy, but we do have some. And essentially, these are what I call general interventions to reduce inflammation. So we'll just skip through those quickly. The point here being is it's easy to switch the immune system on, but it's and that manifests with allergy and autoimmunity, but it's difficult to switch it off. So the first thing is don't switch it on in the first place. And so don't vaccinate. And then if you should get a chronic infection, whatever that may be, a cold, flu, a renal infection, a kidney infection, treat it with what I call groundhog acute. Put in place all things naturopathic to reduce the infectious load and to allow the immune system to develop a normal response. And the two most important tools that I like to use to prevent acute infection are vitamin C and iodine. So vitamin C, 10 grams every hour until you get diarrhea, and that physically washes out infections from the gut. And remember, 90% of all infections come into us through the gut. And the second thing is iodine. You can massively reduce the infectious load in the lungs with a salt pipe and iodine. So this is just Lugol's iodine, 15%, a couple of drops in a salt pipe, like that, and then a good sniff. I can smell that. I love the smell of it. It's delicious. And that gets into the nose and massively reduces the infectious load in the nose, the sinuses, the larynx, the pharynx, the bronchi, the lungs. And it doesn't prevent natural immunity because you still get a little dose of that virus, but it allows the immune system to fight the enemy, but at a much lower dose. So those are the main things to avoid, to stop switching the immune system on. Deal with acute infections actively, and that applies throughout life. And do not vaccinate. They're the two big things. So what we then have to do is, so if we've switched the immune system on, how do we switch it off? And again, there is no one way to switch it off. We just have to put in place all things anti-inflammatory, all things that we know from clinical experience, from historical and what is biologically plausible to damp down inflammation generally. And the single most inflammatory thing you can do to your body is eat sugars and carbohydrates. Sugar switches on inflammation better than anything else. And so the paleo-ketogenic diet is absolutely the starting point. Ketones have marked anti-inflammatory effects. So that's number one. Number two is to tackle the upper fermenting gut. Now, we talked about this in the first presentation of how the upper fermenting gut causes so many issues, because the microbes in the gut get into the bloodstream and that drives inflammation. And the products of the microbes, products of fermentation, alcohol, D-lactate, hydrogen sulfide, together with the toxins that they produce, bacterial endotoxin and fungal mycotoxin, these all have to be detoxified in the liver, and that takes energy. So the upper fermenting gut is really important, and we know how to do that, don't we? We starve it out with the paleo-ketogenic diet, and we kill it with vitamin C, 5 grams in the morning, iodine, 3 drops last thing at night. And when we've done that, then there are some probiotics that are of proven benefit to damp down inflammation. The most important two are probably Lactobacillus rhamnosus, which is known to switch off allergy, and Plantarum. Good anti-inflammatory effects on the gut. And you get the best results from growing your own cultures. Now, they do need a little bit of sugar to grow on. Without the sugar, they don't have the energy to power themselves. So I like to grow mine on coconut milk. I put a little bit of sugar into it, put the bugs in there, let it keep it in a warm place for a few days. And when it tastes sharp, then you know that all those sugars have been fermented out, and drink that. Sauerkraut is another very good way of doing that. That's very helpful. The next, another well-recognized technique for reducing inflammation is fecal bacteria therapy. Major yuck factor, I do see that, but we know that the immune system is programmed in the gut. And if you've got an abnormal microbiome, then you will get abnormal immune programming. And there's a lovely paper on my website by an American gastroenterologist called Dr. Silverman, who describes a do-it-yourself at home technique that some people do choose to do. As I say, it's major yuck factor, I do see that, but highly effective. The next thing we need to do is to put out that anti-inflammatory fire. Now, inflammation is characterized by lots of free radicals being around. And free radicals are potentially very dangerous molecules. So what we need to do is we need to squash those free radicals with antioxidants. And I'm sure many of you are well versed in antioxidants. But we have an antioxidant network of molecules throughout the body. And I think of this it's a little bit like, the Harry Potter game of Quidditch. The electron is like a hot electron has to be squashed, and the frontline grabbers, we see them in the mitochondria, inside cells, and outside or between cells. So inside mitochondria we have coenzyme Q10 and superoxide dismutase, which is manganese dependent. Inside cells we have zinc copper superoxide dismutase, which grabs electrons inside cells in the cell cytosol. And then outside the cells, between cells, we have more superoxide dismutase. We have extra, which again is dependent on zinc and copper, and also glutathione peroxidase, which needs selenium and glutathione for its action. And then we have the intermediate catchers. So they're the front liners. They grab the hot electrons that are generated from mitochondrial function, from inflammation, and from many other cell activities. And then they chuck them, and they are present in the body in microgram amounts. And then they chuck that hot radical back to a second line antioxidants, like many of the B vitamins, especially B12, vitamin A, D, E, K, natural antioxidants that we get from plants. So fresh, organic, raw foods will be abundant in natural antioxidants, and they grab that hot electron from the front liners. And then the final quencher and they're present in the body in milligram amounts. And then the final quencher, the last line of defense, is vitamin C. And that's why we need vitamin C in gram amounts to mop up those nasty toxic free radicals and quench them and render them completely safe. Iodine is additionally helpful. So we've got this whole chain of things, and everything's got to be in place for that to work. We've got to have a good multi-vitamin package, a good multi-mineral package. We've got to have a good organic, whole food, raw diet, if possible. If you don't tolerate raw, then cooked is almost as good. And then vitamin C and iodine are the final quenchers. So much of that, of course, we've already done in our basic workup techniques. And then over and above that, there are some herbs which have got very good anti-inflammatory effects, such as curcumin, ashwagandha, boswellia. These are all useful. In fact, hot off the press, I've just been chatting away with a wonderful German researcher, and he's put together a package of herbs, which he's going to call, which is already named medicinals. So it's spelt the same as medicinals, but with a V at the front. And these are affordable, the right combination of herbs, and we'll touch on this later when we talk about chronic infection. But again, it's a very good all-rounder. Essential oils, again, are often anti-inflammatory, and there's a wonderful book that I always recommend by Caroline Ingraham called Zoo Pharmacognosy. And it's a beautiful book about how animals instinctively know the remedies that they need to treat themselves when they get sick. The one example I love is in the dry season, elephants, there is not the food available, and so elephants are forced to eat the rather dry, tough, arid herbs, which have got some nutritional value but are actually quite toxic. They eat them because they have to, there's nothing else to eat. They then get tummy ache, and to cure that, they then go up into the mountains where they mine clay out of the mountains, and they swallow the clay, and the clay mops up the toxins and renders those foods much more less toxic. So that's very helpful. And then, as I call it, quenching the inflammatory fire. There are minerals that are particularly good at this. Magnesium comes very high up in the list. Magnesium has been dubbed nature's tranquilizer, also essential for energy delivery mechanisms. We know it's involved in at least 300 enzyme systems throughout the body. 300 milligrams a day, and it needs vitamin D for its absorption. So 10,000 IU vitamin D for its absorption. Alkalizing the body with magnesium carbonate, that has good anti-inflammatory properties. So last thing at night, 3, 4, 5 grams dissolved in water. Boron is another very good anti-inflammatory. There's a wonderful paper called Nothing Boring About Boron. So you'll remember that, won't you? Easy to Google and access, and it details all the anti-inflammatory benefits of boron. And then, of course, we can quench the inflammatory fire. A low dose naltrexone is very helpful. Now, this anybody can get hold of. We can get this online. I use an online chemist called All Day Pharmacy, and they can supply you with low dose naltrexone tablets. Now, it comes as naltrexone 50 milligrams. Dissolve that in 50 mL of water, and that gives you 1 milligram per mil. And the dose start off with just 1 milligram under the tongue at night and build up to maybe 4 milligrams. Now, the way this works is low dose naltrexone slightly inhibits the body's own endogenous opiates. And the body responds by producing more. And opiates have marked anti-inflammatory effects. Don't go out and get some heroin. That's going to be an overdose. I don't recommend that. We want to rely on our own body synthesizing the necessary endogenous opiates. And if you Google low dose naltrexone trust, you can see that there is a multiplicity of indications for low dose naltrexone. And what's common to them all is that they are all associated with inflammation. So LDN is a good anti-inflammatory. Another very useful anti-inflammatory that I'm on a steep learning curve at the moment is CBD oil. We have our own endogenous cannabinoid system, which goes down with age and goes down with illness. And CBD oil, start off with 1 drop last thing at night, build up to maybe 3 or 4 drops, has a very good anti-inflammatory, relaxation, good for pain and anxiety as well. So those are the sort of general interventions that I put in place to reduce inflammation. And then we must also think about poisons and toxins, because most poisons and toxins stimulate inflammation. And therefore, to detox is going to be an important part of recovery. And when it comes to detoxing, the first thing we have to think about is, well, what toxins are afflicting us? And of course, the number one are going to be addictions. Addictions, sugar, alcohol, nicotine, caffeine, all these addictions we want to get rid of for starters. The second major source of addictions are products of the upper fermenting gut. We've just talked about that and we know how to deal with that. But tap water, prescription drugs, vaccines, household cleaning agents, dental amalgam, all these things are potentially toxic, and all these things have the ability to switch on the immune system. Now, with all these, so first of all, do your best to avoid. Do a good clean up in the house. If it smells, get rid of it. Cleaning agents, there's much more pollution from within houses than from outside houses. But cleaning agents, insect vapor, like vaponas, exude. I think they're illegal now. But insect repellents, nasty old stuff. Dental amalgam, get rid of that. Cosmetics, most of them are toxic. You shouldn't put anything on your skin that you are not prepared to swallow. It's actually safer to eat cosmetics than it is to put them on your skin, because they pass through the skin and bypass the liver detoxification. So, cosmetics are particularly dangerous. Piercings full of metals, particularly nickel, which can be sensitizing. So I'm going to look ugly because I don't have any earrings or nose rings or jewelry on, but that's worth it because I'm not poisoning myself with the heavy metals. So avoid. First of all, avoid. And the other thing that often turns up in tests is hair dye. The only safe hair dye to use is henna. So you're going to have to be like me. You're going to have to either have a grey hair or you're going to have to be ginger haired. And don't be fooled by henna black. That is toxic. So hair dyes are really toxic. I'm going to tell you a joke now. One of my favourite authors is P.G. Wodehouse. who announced that there is a cure for grey hair. It was invented by a Frenchman, and it's called the guillotine. So guess what? I think I'll keep my hair and my head. But broadly speaking, there are two major routes that we can to help the body to detoxify. Obviously, three actually. The liver, of course, is one, and we've covered that. We've helped the liver by reducing the toxic load and giving it vitamins and minerals and essential fatty acids. But so three routes, the liver. Secondly, heating regimes. And my favorite heating regime is Epsom salt baths. Now, I've done toxicity tests before and after. The tests are expensive, but the point is I've collected 30 patients before and after, and in every single case, the toxic load comes down. We don't have to do the studies. Bill Ray has done the study as well. 2010 patients tacked in the environmental center in Dallas in Texas. He measured toxic loads before and after such heating regimes, and the levels come down reliably well. The heating regime I like to use is Epsom salt bath. Very cheap, very easy to do. It can become part of our normal life. So should you have a bath, you put about ½ kilogram of Epsom salts in your bath and soak in that for 20 minutes. And not only does that pull toxins out of the skin, it also gives you a nice dose of magnesium. That gets a thumbs up. A nice dose of sulfate, that further helps you to detoxify, and it's very cheap. You can get Epsom salts online from epsomsalts.co.uk, delivered to your door, 20 kilos, about 35 quid. So each bath costs less than £1. If you've got a shower, then what I recommend you do is get yourself a shower bath, which is like a little